The challenge to test and see. Any questions? You can write them out. Challenge to test and see. Did that literature throw out a challenge and say, well, here I am, test me out? In Hinduism, we have to accept it as it is, otherwise there is no point in trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita and its speaker, Lord Krishna. The Hindu literature does not throw out a challenge to test. It just says, here it is, you can take it or you can leave it aside. Buddhism, the genuine realization of the emptiness of the phenomenon world is a direct intuition of the highest truth. Absolute truth is unconditional, undeterminate, and beyond thought and word. Once again, clearly stating that we are unable to actually grapple with it. We either take it or we leave it aside. You cannot test it by any means, except experience. And both these religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, say the test is the experience of it. For me, and that's my search, the question of why should I test this and not that? Give me a reason for testing. And if you don't give me a reason, then let me look at something, some other one that gives me a reason for testing. I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying you put the cart before the horse if you say first test it out. And if you have to test it out, you have to get into the experience of it. And here are other religions telling me if you ever go and experience that one, you are out for the count. So give me a reason. So those two don't allow us to really test it except by personal experience. Islam does throw out a challenge. It says, produce one chapter comparable to it, the Quran. Call upon your idols to assist you if what you say is true. But if you fail, as you are sure to fail, in other words, the Quran writing is of such a nature that nobody else can equal it. And so the challenge is, can anybody produce writing that is comparable to it? There are 3 or 4 verses in the Quran which throw out a challenge. Produce a book, or produce a chapter, or even produce a verse that is comparable to the Quran. I took up the challenge and I said, okay, let me try to do what they are saying because it's a challenge, and honestly, go and see if you can get it done. There were 4 snags that killed the attempt. Number 1, it would not say what aspect to be equaled. Whether it is the prose or the poetry or the truth or the doctrine or the concept of God, what was it that I am supposed to equal? It wouldn't say. Number 2, what would be the method of comparison? Some kind of point system, or just a feeling that you have equaled it or not equaled it or surpassed it? There is no way that it gave us a method of comparison. So even if I wanted to do it, how will we come to a conclusion after I have done the test? Number 3, who will be the judge that it has been done? Will it be some neutral committee from the United Nations? Or would it be a mullah in one of the mosques? Or a Muslim committee, or just any other neutral committee? It does not say so, though by default, when you throw out a challenge, by default it goes to the individual. And so I would have to be the judge. And I honestly can say that I have read, if it is talking about the beauty of the Quran, because that is one of its top features, and we'll see that in the next section, then I honestly have read writing that I think I must say equals at least the beauty of the Quran. Because I don't know how beautiful it is. The Quran is written in Arabic. I don't know Arabic. So, writings like Khalil Gibran, Omar Khayyam, even Shakespeare, you put them all, or from my country, he was a Nobel laureate many years ago, Rabindranath Tagore. He wrote the book Gitanjali, which got him the Nobel Prize. You read the beautiful flow of language. I honestly cannot say that they are worse than the Quran. I'll have to say they are at least equal. So if I am the judge, the test is over. Number 4, what language? The Orthodox Muslim accepts only one language of divine communication. In fact, what I have that I read in the Quran, Quran in quotes, is an English translation by N.J. Dawood. An orthodox Muslim will never accept that as the Quran, because the Quran is a Quran only in the Arabic language. So if I must take up this challenge, I must write it in Arabic. How many of us then would it include? I know hundreds and thousands of Muslims who do not know one single sentence of literary Arabic. And therefore, the test has lost its universal character. A test that applies to only a narrow segment of the world's population and is nebulous because it does not tell us what and how to do it, is not a real test. You can challenge me on that, but I believe it cannot be called a real test. When it comes to the Judeo-Christian, and I put these two together because of the nature of the test. The Judaic literature are parts of the law and the prophets and the writings, and the Christian literature is the New Testament, the Gospels and the writings of Paul and the others. Present your case, says the Lord. Let them bring forth and show us what will happen. Declare to us things to come. Show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that you are gods. Here is a clear-cut challenge. In other words, this writing is going to make what is known as a predictive prophecy. And a predictive prophecy means this: you can identify when it was made, and you can also independently identify whether it was fulfilled or not. That is called a predictive prophecy. And this writing says that it will make predictive prophecies, and can anybody else equal that? As clear-cut and as precise as what is written here. So I looked at that. For instance, one regarding Babylon. Jeremiah wrote this in about 595 BC, according to historical calculations. At that time, Babylon was the greatest city on earth. It was the most fortified. It had walls that at the top were so broad that 2 chariots could run side by side round the whole city. And sometimes we think this is a high wall. It's about 40 feet, 45 feet. Do you know how high the walls of Babylon went up to? 200 feet. People would wonder whether they should lay siege to Babylon. Do you know why? Because when you lay siege, what you are trying to do is starve them out. Don't let them come in and out. And when their supplies of food is gone inside the city, they just have to come out. And here you are with your armament and your army, and you wipe them off. And that's the meaning of a siege. The people in Babylon would laugh at anybody wanting to do a siege, because the longest sieges of a very rich king would be about 3 years. He would pay his soldiers just to stand around the city. And no king wants to do that. They want to fight and they want to win. So the longest sieges are about 3 years. Babylon would laugh at anybody wanting to lay siege of the city, because inside Babylon, in their storehouses, they had food enough for the entire population for 20 years. You just could not do anything about Babylon, and yet this is what this prophet said: Babylon shall become a heap without an inhabitant, and I will make her springs dry. Do you know how Babylon fell? Babylon was supplied by the river Euphrates, which went under it on one side and came out the other side of the city. That was its water supply. When Cyrus the Mede came, he wanted to be world emperor. And this is one citadel that was standing in his way. If he got it, he would be world emperor. During his forays with his army, crossing the Euphrates not far from Babylon, his horse died in the river. He was very upset. His favorite horse died in the river. So he blamed the river for the death of his horse. And he was so upset that he called his army generals and he said, I want this river dry. Just no more flowing of the river Euphrates. And so his generals and the soldiers manually dug 80 to 300 parallel aqueducts, and then opened the floodgates and pulled the river into those aqueducts. And once the river went into the aqueducts, there was a dry land that went under the wall and across to the other side. And Cyrus said, that's the way I'll enter the city. Babylon fell in one night. I will make her springs dry. That's how it fell. And today, this is Smithsonian. So we saw, like I said, predictive prophecy. We can independently make out when it was said. It was a religious writing that said it. But the fulfillment is not a religious writing. It is something that is a secular writing in today's language now. The Smithsonian, June 2003, page 50 says, few words evoke as many images of ancient decadence, glory, and prophetic doom as does Babylon. Yet the actual place, 50 miles south of Baghdad, is flat, hot, what's the next word? Deserted. You go back to the statement of Jeremiah, it shall become a heap without an inhabitant. 2,500 years have passed, and it is still without an inhabitant. So it's fair for us to say that you and I can vouch that a prophecy was made, and we can go to Baghdad today and see that it has remained fulfilled. 2,500 years. It might take about 50 years for any town to get knocked off. But when something stays that long as a prophecy, I think we should at least give it some credence. How about the next one? Place of births. Way back about 500 years before the actual birth, there was a writing that this person would be born in a town called Bethlehem. Now there are two Bethlehems in the Palestinian area. The family never lived in Bethlehem. The family lived in Nazareth. In a 500-year span time, this family went to Bethlehem because a foreign king said, go back to your ancestral home for just a few weeks so that your census can be taken and then you can go back home to your present home. And so this family went to that place called Bethlehem for just 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and of all the things, she was pregnant up to the 9th month. At that 2-3 weeks, got her baby there, went back to Nazareth, and never went back to Bethlehem. Once again, a prophecy, we know what that was made, and we know that it was fulfilled. Number 3, vinegar. Now what do you give somebody who is thirsty? Water, juice, milk, something like that. Who gives vinegar to drink? But 1,000 years before the event, it was written that somebody would say, I am thirsty, and instead of giving him milk, drink, fruit juice, or water, they would give him vinegar. And that's exactly what happened. He said, I thirst, and they filled a sponge with sour wine, which is vinegar, and put it to his mouth. If I am a prophet today, and I came to you, and everybody in your home has straight blonde hair, and I stand before you and I say, you are going to get a son with black curly hair. And at the age of 4, he will be able to read all of Shakespeare's works. And at the age of 12, he's going to graduate from university with a professional degree. And at the age of 20, he will go to the Olympics and win a gold medal in the butterfly stroke. And at the age of 30, he will win the Nobel Prize in astrophysics. 5 predictions I make. If all 5 come true in your family, I'll guarantee you will chase me to the ends of the earth to find out what my next prediction is going to be. Yes. Whoever heard of this kind of predictions, right? 5. If I made 10, you would say, this guy belongs out of this world. Scholars tell us that in this Judeo-Christian scriptures, there are 600 that have come true. 322 regarding one single individual. 24 of them came to pass in one weekend. I believe that when a challenge is thrown out, and if we are honest in our search, like we said we were going to be, then if the evidence comes to us, we must accept the evidence. That here is a book, here is a writing that did throw out a challenge and met its own challenge in a very impressive way, and there is no other literature on earth that can equal this kind of a performance. There are prophecies in other literature. I'll give you an example. None of them are predictive prophecies. In other words, the prophecies was made here, and we saw its fulfillment right here, and it's independent one from the other. For instance, one from the Hindu literature. Vishnu, their god, the preserver god, comes down to this earth once in every age. The total number is supposed to be 10. There will be 10 incarnations of the god Vishnu. 9 have taken place. Therefore, the 10th has been predicted. And they're predicting his name too. His name is Kalkin. Kalkin is going to come 230,000 years hence. Now, how can I check that out? You see, it's a prophecy, but it's not called predictive prophecy because I can't really check it out. The Islamic literature does have a prophecy. If you read carefully between the lines, there is a prophecy that Mecca would be destroyed by an army. And the writer of that prophecy is Muhammad. He writes the prophecy, and then he takes his army and destroys Mecca. Once again, they are not independent. Whereas this literature, in its predictive prophecy, is independent when it says what it says. And we can check it out. And you can check it out historically. When we go to the founders tomorrow, you will see that it seemed to be that, it's out in front. It did make me uncomfortable because I am a physician. I do read my own literature in the periodicals, the medical periodicals. And if it is too much to one side, it's always suspect. If the numbers are too big, it's always suspect. So when it started this way, I really got a little uncomfortable. And then I stopped my search at a certain point and I said, no, I'm not going to just ask any old question. I'm going to specifically look for factors in which this man doesn't come out in front. And tomorrow we'll look at 3 factors in which he simply doesn't come out in front. So you may think that I'm just pushing it all out in front, but let's look at those factors as well. We'll look at them tomorrow. Right now, let's finish this.